So that's, as you may see in the big screen above you, I'm Alex Pazaitis. I'm from Greece, and I'm here from P2P Lab, which you may know as the research arm of the P2P Foundation. And before getting in deeper into the concepts of platform and open cooperativism, I'm just providing our little story as maybe a case of an open coop, and we may discuss it afterwards. So to start up, we were, of course, inspired by the P2P movement from open source software all the way to Wikipedia and open hardware, and envisioning an open design physical world that we would ideally like to see happening. And that led us to the idea of the P2P lab. But if I may take us some years behind, this is how we used to look like some years ago. And you may recognize the logo, by the way, from the P2P Foundation logo. And it was initiated as an idea by co-founder Vasilis Kostakis, who was back then a really young researcher at the Tallinn University of Technology, who worked on P2P technologies, basically 3D printing and Arduino microcontrollers. And he had the idea that working on such technologies would make much more sense if you had actual people sharing the technologies, and all of them worked on them as a community. And so an initial community-driven hackerspace was set up. It was not so much fancy as a place, but it was created with lots of love and inspiration. But through that community that was supporting and co-managing the hackerspace, a different group emerged of some people who had more professional aspirations and wanted to make a living out of doing research on P2P technologies. And that led us to P2P Lab as we know it today, and as you might know it after today's presentation, which is an interdisciplinary research hub just dedicated to the study and documentation of P2P technologies and collaborative practices. We were not alone. From the beginning on, P2P Foundation has provided some tremendous inspiration and guidance and support through the global community of activists and scholars, and at the same time retaining the relations with the Ragnar Nurkse School of Innovation and Governance in the Tallinn University of Technology in Estonia, which is basically one of the few schools doing research on heterodox economics and presenting alternative approaches in technology governance. And they were kind enough to offer us a little space in providing our alternative approach within this framework. And so we ended up to this type of model that kind of balances between academia and the civil society, trying to maybe support the civil society's potential in research and innovation and transitional dynamics. And but we developed from an open community-driven hackerspace to a more closed model, actually, which had to also serve as a co-working space. But we also developed new facilities, and we wanted to retain that open relation with the community, so offering some open days, some days a week, so that people could use our collaborative meeting place or organize events and experiment with 3D printers in our little lab or browse through our library. And but chiefly it is still a co-working space for the members of the P2P Lab. And in that sense, how is our relation with the commons? And this is where we find it's not what we are, but actually what we do. And we try to offer alternative practical research and through participatory action research, and that way to support and enrich the commons through either our processes or maybe our output, which our research outcomes are basically anything from an actual artifact or a prototype to a process or a model. If I may provide some examples, this is the model, an early prototype of the Helix T wind turbine for low-scale energy domestic production, and which was being collaboratively designed with an online community. Or it could be a learning process, which is a learning by doing process tested in 2 schools in Ioannina, Greece. These are actual artifacts developed by students experimenting with 3D printers and learning by doing processes. And it could also be an artwork. This is in Greek, The Man with a Spotted Tie, a theatrical play which we like to call wiki theater because it's not created by one single author, but is a collaboration of 5 different authors who never actually met in person during that work and collaborated through a wiki. Or finally, our current flagship project would like to have as an outcome an integrated production model, which we call Design Global, Manufacture Local. Some other people might have the opportunity to learn more about that in the other hall right here, right now, but it doesn't matter. And so to finish up, whether P2P Lab is an open corp or it isn't, as regards openness, we emphasize our contribution and support of the commons either directly by the outcomes of our research or by supporting and enriching the commons through scientific knowledge or technologies or processes or practices that we develop and document. At the same time, we like to work with communities, local communities or global community supporting what we do. And on the other hand, we, well, as said at the very beginning, we wanted to make a living out of this work. So we had to adopt a cooperative organization, which made sense. And P2P Lab is basically a worker-owned cooperative, one could say. There are no hierarchies, no official hierarchies at least. And it's, there are some meritocracy, of course, based on reputation, basically. But to this process, we faced many challenges. We faced many problems with the legal system, which is not compatible. Sometimes we need to maneuver through the system. Other times you need to challenge the system. For example, in order to develop those facilities which you saw, it's we acquired EU funding, which was directed initially for mainstream enterprises, businesses, basically. So we had to adopt a sole proprietorship legal form, which is our current legal form. However, that is on the front end, while at the back end, it doesn't stop us from having genuine cooperative governance and sharing resources and work in this way. We're actually 6 months away from becoming officially cooperative, which is fulfilling the requirements of the funding. But at the same time, we had to comply with other things like keeping an 8-hour working day, which was not the case because we were virtually, practically never on the place to work. We worked remotely from many places in a synchronous manner. We were pretty much autonomous, not having labor, worker, employer, and employee relations. And we had to retain some relations with more traditional institutions like the Tallinn University of Technology, in some cases even the Greek government with the Syriza plan for the commons, and we did not work so well, but we did manage to retain that relation. And finally, we also had to challenge the system by some illegal practices, one might say. We cannot compromise in not sharing our research results openly, but they are mostly published in proprietary journals and editions, so we do share them anyway, but please don't tell anyone, but you may check them out. And to finish with that, I might come up with some questions which the panel can later on provide the discussion some answers to, probably. We would like to, we say that we're an open cooperative, and so in that sense, it's a compromise between openness or the open source movement and the whole sharing of resources and outcomes and in the sphere of the commons, but at the same time, if this is going to work in some time of entrepreneurial spirit, there are some enclosures, some type of enclosures at least, and so in this sense, how much open and how much cooperative should an open cooperative be, and what does each of these two things actually mean? And with that, I will finish, and thank you for your attention.